The purpose of this PowerPoint is to take you through the cardiovascular system and the important points about the system. So, the cardiovascular system is a transport system. It transports blood in circulation inside blood vessels. Blood itself is transporting things like blood gases, oxygen and carbon dioxide, hormones, nutrients, waste, electrolytes, etc. The blood vessels that transport blood come in two types, arteries and veins. There's a third type called capillaries, which we're not going to mention, but the main ones, the large ones I should say, are the arteries and the veins. Notice the definition of artery and vein. An artery is a blood vessel that takes blood away from the heart. It doesn't matter whether the blood has oxygen or not. If the blood is moving away from the heart, it is an artery. Veins, on the other hand, bring blood towards the heart. So again, the term veins pertains to the direction of the movement of the blood towards the heart. The pump that is going to pump blood within the blood vessels is going to be the heart. Okay? So there's the heart, and the heart is described actually as two pumps. Notice that it has two chambers, two on top and two at the bottom. Notice that the right side and the left side are not connected. There is a thick wall separating right and left chambers. The top chambers are called the atria. So we have a right atrium and a left atrium. Oops, this is incorrect. That should say ventricle. All right, I'm going to go ahead and fix these in the actual PowerPoint. The right ventricle and the left ventricle. Notice that the right side is painted blue and the left side is painted red. The reason for that is because this definitely has to be corrected. I'm sorry about that. I'll correct it in the actual PowerPoint. The right side is circulating deoxygenated blood. So this is blood that has already circulated throughout the body and has delivered the oxygen to the tissues, and now it's coming back to the heart to go from the heart to the lungs to be oxygenated again. So the right heart, the right side of the heart receives blood that has lost its oxygen, deoxygenated, and the blood is going to transfer from the top chamber, the right atrium, into the right ventricle, and from there is going to be pumped out through these large blood vessel. Notice that it's painted blue because again it's carrying the oxygenated blood, and the blood vessel, notice the direction of the blood, which means it's going away from the heart, so the blood vessel will be an artery. And it's going to direct the blood to the lungs, to the left lung and the right lung, where the blood is going to be oxygenated, and from there is going to come back oxygenated into the left atrium. From the left atrium, blood is passed onto the left ventricle, and from there is going to be pumped out through this huge artery called the aorta. So the left side is pumping oxygenated blood while the right side is pumping oxygenated blood. So you can see how this is a two-pump system because first of all, the right and the left side are not connecting with each other, and they are pumping to different places and receiving blood from different places. All right, so each pump has a different circuit of circulation. The right side, the one that's dealing with the oxygenated blood, is pumping to the lungs. So it's called the pulmonary circuit. Pulmonary means lungs. So it's pumping blood to the lungs to be oxygenated. The left side is receiving the oxygenated blood from the lungs and is going to pump it to the rest of the body to oxygenate the rest of the body. Okay, so the left side is involved in what's called the systemic circuit. And you need to keep those two circuits straight. And this is showing you the pulmonary and the systemic circuit. So here you have the pulmonary circuit, which starts at the right atrium, receiving the oxygenated blood, moving the oxygenated blood to the right ventricle, goes out through the pulmonary arteries. From there it goes to the lungs oxygenate, blood comes back. Okay, what is coming back? Right there, comes back over here into the left atrium via the pulmonary veins. From there, blood moves out through the left ventricle into the aorta, and then it's going to go into the rest of the body. So the left side circulation is systemic circulation, right side circulation is pulmonary circulation. More of the same, so you need to keep straight the right side pulmonary circulation, left side systemic circulation. And you can see here how blood is coming back after circulating through the body through these two large veins called the superior vena cava and the inferior vena cava. We're going to look at these here next. Okay, any minute now. Okay, now notice that between the atria and the ventricles, we have these thick valves made of connective tissue. Same thing on the left side, we have these thick valves. These valves are called the atrioventricular valves or AV valves. The one on the right is called the tricuspid valve, supposed to have 3 cusps. The one on the left is called the bicuspid or mitral valve. It has 2 cusps. And mitral is the hat that bishops wear, which have 2 cusps. So those are the valves that control the movement of blood from atria to ventricles. On the other hand, controlling the movement of blood into the arteries from the ventricles are a set of valves called called semilunar valves. And they're called valves because there's about 4 of them. You can see 2 here, you can see maybe 1 there, but there's actually 4 little cups that are going to act as valves, controlling the movement of blood from ventricle into these large arteries. The one on the right-hand side is called the pulmonary semilunar valve, and blood being pumped out through the right ventricle is going to go through the pulmonary semilunar valve into the pulmonary trunk, which leads to pulmonary arteries that are going to go to the lungs. On the left side, oxygenated blood is coming back through pulmonary veins, and it's moved from the left atrium into the left ventricle past the bicuspid or mitral valve. From there, when the left ventricles contract, when both ventricles contract, blood is going to be pumped out of the left ventricle past the aortic semilunar valve into the aorta. Okay, so the 2 upper chambers are called the atria, and their job is to collect blood from veins and then to relay that blood to the ventricles. The ventricles are inferior, they're thick, they're muscular, they are the main chamber of the heart, and when they contract, they have very powerful muscles that are going to pump blood out of the heart. On the right side, towards the lungs, on the left side, through the aorta to the rest of the body. Notice that the right and the left chambers are independent of each other, so blood should never mix from right to left. They're separated by walls called septums. So the interatrial septum and the interventricular septum should separate the atria, right and left atria, from right and left ventricles. And this is from a laboratory model. You can see here the atria and the interatrial septum. You can see down here the ventricle and the interventricular septum. You can see on the right-hand side the tricuspid valve. On the left-hand side, the bicuspid or mitral valve. You can see over here the pulmonary semilunar valve, and then the aortic semilunar valve cannot be seen. So the atria is going to collect venous blood that is arriving on the right-hand side from superior vena cava, inferior vena cava, which are bringing the oxygenated blood from the entire body. And there's another vein that arrives at the right atrium from the heart itself. That's called the coronary sinus. So there are 3 blood vessels that dump blood, deoxygenated venous blood, into the right atria. Also on the right atria, we're going to find 2 structures that cannot be seen because they're microscopic. And we're going to talk about these a little bit later. Those are the SA node and the AV nodes. They're found on the right atrium. On the left atrium, the left atrium receives oxygenated blood from the right and left pulmonary veins. Okay, so let's go through these. Blood comes into the right atrium via the superior vena cava, the inferior vena cava, and the coronary sinus. From there, the oxygen passed the tricuspid valve into the right ventricle. From the right ventricle, blood will be pumped out through the pulmonary semilunar valve into the pulmonary trunk, and then diverted into right and left pulmonary arteries to go towards the lungs. Blood comes back to the left through the right and left pulmonary veins. From there is moved past the bicuspid or mitral valve into the left ventricle, and from there is going to be pumped out past the aortic semilunar valve into the aorta. So you should know the circulation of blood within the heart. Okay, so the ventricles receive blood from the atria and pump that blood through arteries. The right side has the opening to the pulmonary trunk, which is an artery that is going to split into right and left pulmonary arteries that are going to go to the right and left lungs. On the left side, the left ventricle is going to have the opening to the aorta and past the aortic semilunar valve. Notice that both atria will contract at the same time. Both ventricles contract at the same time. So there is a coordinated movement of the atria first, then the ventricle second. While the atria is relaxed, then the entire heart relaxes and the whole process begins again. And again, this is just going over the oxygenated blood and how when it arrives, and oxygenated blood where it arrives. So again, just know the pulmonary and systemic circulation within the heart. And yet one more time, this is going through every single one of the structures that blood goes through as it arrives from the right-hand side as deoxygenated blood, and then goes to the lungs, and from there arrives at the left side to start systemic circulation. Okay, so this rhythmic contraction and relaxation of the heart, and again, the 2 atria will contract, then they relax, then the ventricles contract, then everybody relaxes, and then the whole cycle begins again. This is called the cardiac cycle. When the heart contracts, we're going to call it systole. Relaxation is going to be called diastole. So during the cardiac cycle, the atria and left are going to contract. So atria is going to go into systole. Then the atria relaxes while the ventricles go into systole. Then everybody relaxes. So atria and ventricles will be in diastole. And then we'll start again. While the atria is in systole, the ventricle is in diastole. Then the atria relaxes and the ventricle contracts. Then everybody relaxes. So atria contract, ventricle is relaxed. Then ventricle contracts, atria is relaxed. Then everybody relaxes and the whole cycle begins again. Okay. The longest cycle is going to be the relaxation cycle, followed by the ventricular contraction. Those are the most important cycles right there. So ventricular systole is the second. All right, so this picture right here is showing you diastole of both ventricle and atria. Remember, at one point, everybody's relaxed. So if of atria and ventricle, and this is the longest step in the cycle. And the cycle lasts a little bit less than a second, normally. So atria and ventricles are relaxed under those conditions, and notice that we're looking at the left side only. However, exactly the same thing is happening at the right side. So when the heart is relaxed, blood is coming in from the veins. So in this case, the pulmonary veins. On the right side, it will be superior vena cava, inferior vena cava, and pulmonary, and the sinus, the coronary sinus. Okay, so blood is pouring in. And notice that the bicuspid valve is open. The AV valve is open. Same thing on the right side, the tricuspid valve will be open, allowing blood to pour into the ventricle. Notice at the same time that the semilunar valves are closed. So the aortic semilunar valve is closed. The pulmonary semilunar valve will be closed on the right-hand side. The reason why, and the pictures never really show you these, is because these huge blood vessels are filled with blood. And unless the blood is being pushed forward, the blood is going to pool and fill these little cusps of the semilunar valves and close them. Okay, so during relaxation, semilunar valves are closed, AV valves are open, and blood is moving from atria to ventricle, filling the ventricles with blood. Look at what happens with contraction. And again, we're only looking at the left side, but you know that the right side is also contracting because the two ventricles contract at the same time. So this is ventricular systole. So during ventricular systole, the atria is relaxed. So atria is in diastole. And because the ventricle is contracting, the cords that attach to the AV valves are going to be pulled and the AV valves are going to be closed. By the same token, because of the force of contraction is going to push the semilunar valves open and blood will be pumped out. That's what's called the stroke volume. So that is what's happening during contraction. Notice that it says here heart sound. The heart sounds come when the valves close. Just like if you slam a door, you'll hear a sound. Same thing here. When you close the valve, that's when the sound happens. So the first heart sound would happen when the semilunar valves closed. At the start of diastole, at the very beginning of diastole, the semilunar valves are going to close, and that's going to give us the first heart sound. Then at the during systole, ventricular systole, when the AV valves close, that's going to give us the heart sound also. Okay. All right, so this is an important concept. So first of all, you have to have an idea of the anatomy and how blood circulates within the heart. The ability of the heart to contract is not dependent on the nervous system. The heart is has an autonomous contraction. It can initiate action potentials on its own and contract on its own. That means that we could cut, and we do these during a heart transplant. We cut the heart away from the body, we cut all of the nerves out, and yet the heart continues to beat. Within the heart, within the right atrium, the muscle of the right atrium, there's a little pocket of cells called the nodal cells. Specifically, that little pocket is called the SA node, or the pacemaker cells. And the minute those cells are developed in the ionic heart, they're going to begin to create signals, action potentials. And they create an action potential, and then another one, and then another one in a rhythmic fashion. They're going to relay that action potential to not only the other nodal cells in the heart, but also to the contractile cells in the heart, the ones that are going to contract. So, but the pacemaker cells are found in the SA node. SA stands for sinoatrial node, and they're the ones that initiate the signal to contract. The second set of nodal cells that are going to receive the action potentials from the SA node and spread them from there is going to be the AV node. AV stands for atrioventricular node. And let me show you where all this is located. Okay, so this is the SA node, which is the pacemaker of the heart. That's where the action potentials are initiated. From there, the action potentials begin to travel down a nodal pathway towards the AV node down here. But notice that the action potentials also is spread to the other cells of the heart, of the atria, which are going to begin to contract. Okay, the AV node down here is going to delay the signal for a few seconds, waiting for the atria to contract. After the atria contracts, the AV node begins to let the signal go into the ventricles to a nodal pathway called the AV bundle. So there's the AV bundle right there. AV bundle is splits into AV branches, or bundle branches, right here, bundle branches, which then are going to carry the signal to the Purkinje cells. I'll show you in just a second. All the while, the signal is also being moved to other parts of the heart so that the ventricle will begin contraction. So these are the Purkinje cells. So just to recap, the signal travels from S to do that. Okay. All right. Just a second. This is not cooperating. Okay, there we go. Actually, I'm going to use this one right here, which is a much better PowerPoint. Okay, there we go. So from SA node, okay, from SA node right here, through these nodal pathways, and then notice that it's going on to the other parts of the atria, to the AV node. So from SA node to AV node. AV node delays the signal long enough to give a chance for the atria to contract, and then the signal travels down the AV bundle. Okay, so it used to be called the bundle of His. And now the signal is into the ventricle. So the AV node sends the signal into the ventricles. The AV bundle splits into bundle branches, and then bundle branches are going to send a signal to the rest of the ventricle via the Purkinje cells. And so the ventricle will begin to contract. So you should know the path that these signals take through the heart. These electrical signals can be detected. They create electrical impulses, not only in the heart, but throughout the body. So we could detect those signals at the surface of the body. And that's what an electrocardiogram, or ECG, is going to do. A typical ECG will create a wave every time the chambers contract. So there's going to be the chambers relax. So contraction means a change in electrical signals in the cells of the heart. So let me go ahead and show you. Okay, so this is the wave. This is the sinus rhythm, or the normal EKG. So first, remember that the atria contracts. So there is a change in electrical signals in the atria, and the atria will contract. That creates depolarization. Then the atria is going to relax, and that's going to create another signal, another wave, which we cannot see, because by then the ventricle is contracting and it's creating a huge wave because the ventricle is so huge, creates a humongous wave. There's lots of cells there changing their electrical signals, and that will create a huge wave, which is the ventricular contraction or depolarization, and the wave is called the QRS wave. Okay. Then the ventricle will relax, and you can see that wave. That's the T wave, ventricular depolarization or relaxation. And then the whole thing begins again. So what we have here is the, okay, not nice at all. Give me a second, let me go back. Okay, there we were, much better. I apologize for that. I'm just doing the best I can here, and it just doesn't cooperate very well. Oh man, okay, give me a second. Click to exit. I don't want to exit. Just end it real quick, but then go back to where we were. Okay, so there is the sinus rhythm. P wave is the contraction of the atria. We don't see the relaxation of the atria because the wave is masked by the contraction of the ventricle, which is the QRS wave, and the T is the relaxation of the ventricle. Notice the intervals. So the intervals are going to be the spaces between the waves. So we have a PQ interval. So between P and Q, there's an interval. And so this area right here is showing us the signal going from the AV node into the ventricles. Okay, so the longer this segment, the longer it's taken for that signal to travel from AV node into the ventricles. Then we have the QRS, and the interval there will be the QT interval. QT interval is showing you the signal traveling through the ventricle. So that would be the AV bundle of His, Purkinje cells. The longer that interval, that is telling you either the ventricle is enlarged, too large, and so it's taking longer for the signal to travel, or there may be blockages, which are preventing the signal from traveling quickly. The signal is traveling very, very slowly. Okay. The other interval, so we have the ST, which is not being shown here, the ST interval. Okay, so you should be able to recognize the different intervals. And given a sinus wave, EKG, normal EKG, you should be able to identify the different waves, P, QRS, and T, and the intervals. All right, tachycardia is when the heart beats too fast. A normal heartbeat is between 60, 80 beats per minute. Anything above 100 is too fast. Bradycardia is the opposite, when the heart is beating less than 60 beats per minute. And fibrillation occurs when there is uncoordinated heart contractions. Okay, so instead of the atria contracting first, relaxation, ventricle contracting second, everybody relaxes, and then the atria contract again. There are focus of contractions happening at different times in the cycle. Okay, so those are the PowerPoints that would allow you to work the study guide sheet. The next two PowerPoints will go together with the worksheet number 5. So question 3 is asking you to look at this picture right here, okay, and it's asking you to explain what would happen if there was a connection, an opening between the right atrium and the left atrium. And that is a normal condition in the fetal heart because the lungs are not working. So the blood in the fetus is being oxygenated by the placenta. So there is no need to send blood to the lungs. The minute that the baby is born and it takes its first breath, that connection would close. So what is the purpose of that connection? Why does the fetal heart have a connection between right and left atrium? So remember, from the right, if you go from the right directly to the left atrium, then blood is going to go out towards the left ventricle and then out to the aorta to the rest of the body, which will mean it will eventually end up in the placenta. Now, the next question is, what would happen if the connection doesn't close? And that does happen in some instances in which the connection does not close. What does that mean to the baby? What problems will we have then? Remember that the right side is, whereas the left is having oxygenated blood. That's not nice. Okay, so that is essentially the gist of this chapter. Let's see. I'm gonna go ahead and open something else here real quick, if it'll allow me to do that. Second. Perfect. Okay. Okay, I wanted to show you the actual worksheet. Oh. Okay. No such luck, actually. So let me go ahead and end the recording here, and I may make another one with the worksheet.